Hey, what's up everybody? So today's video is my most requested tutorial ever, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about tuning. Now, let me first start off by saying that I don't consider myself to be a professional at tuning. I'm not going to, I don't have like a science to it or anything like that. The way I do it is just what gets a great sound out of my drums, and it may be different than the way someone else does it, but what you can do is you can take a look at how I do it and incorporate some of the ideas you like and figure out what works best for you. Now, let me also say that when you're tuning a drum, there are so many things that affect the way the drum actually sounds. And so, exactly the way I do it may not bring the best result for you. You have to take what works from my setup and how I do it and incorporate it into the way you play. And so, the things that most affect the way a drum sounds is the drum itself. Now, you have to start off with a drum that can sound good. Now, with proper tuning, a lot of drums that may not be so nice can sound good, but what you have to do is, in order to get the best sound, you have to start out with a drum that's made very well. Now, the drums I'm going to be showing you today are the Pearl Export Series drums, a brand new export series from Pearl. It's been totally redone and redesigned, and it uses the same shell technology that Pearl's top of the line drums use in a very, very affordable entry level kit. And so these drums are made extremely well, and that really contributes to how well they sound. Now, the second most important thing is the drum heads themselves. Now, depending on the sound you're going for, there's a huge variety of drum heads that you need to take a look at. And really, which ones you pick is going to make a huge emphasis on how the drums sound. But what I always recommend, the drum heads that I love and use all the time, are Remo drum heads. And actually today, I'm using a different type of head than what I normally play. I normally play the Weather King pinstripes, and I've gotten an excellent, incredible tone out of those for years now. And this new kit, different color, it's black, and I wanted to try something a little bit different, so I went with some coated emperors. So these drum heads are, I think, the best-selling drum heads out there as far as drum heads go. So I'm really expecting a lot of awesome things from them, and so I'll show those to you. But yeah, so drum heads is the number two most important thing. A good drum head combined with a good drum will sound good even without the best tuning. And so then you bring in the human aspect. After you tune the drums really, really well, the way you play the drums still affects how it sounds. So say you get the same drums as me, same heads as me, we're using the same exact stuff, you do the exact same tuning that I do, but you play way different than me, you're not going to get the same exact sound I get. So those are the three most important things you have to consider. Alright, so first I'm going to grab a drum over there, and I'm going to set it up, put on two different heads, the top and the bottom head, and I'm going to show you the proper way to install a drum head on a drum. And that's really important as far as getting the best sound, is putting the head on properly. Because if you tighten it down too much, or you tighten down one side before the other, or you don't center it on the drum very well, all those things really affect the way the drum head ends up sounding because you're not using it to its maximum potential. So let's take a look at how to put on a drum head properly. Now you got your gorgeous Pearl Export drum here, and got my beautiful new white Remo head. It's a coated Emperor, and these are actually the first time I've ever used these on my drums, so I'm pretty excited for the result. But what you got to do is first you want to go ahead and set the head up the way you want it on the drum. I usually line up my logos to my badges just because it looks the best, and you want it to look good. So then you get your first rim, and when you set the rim on, you want to line it up with the tension rods and the lugs. So get it lined up with the lugs and the tension rods. And so at this point, you're going to place the lugs. Go ahead and put the tension rods inside of the lugs. You want to do that for all of them so that they're at least in there a little bit. Now, here's the important part. Make sure that your head is lined up where you want it to be, and then you want to center the rim on the head. You want to make sure that there's not a bigger gap on one side than the other side, and that will help anchor the actual drum head to the drum in a way that is even on all sides. And so at this point, you want to go ahead and choose two tension rods opposite of each other. Make sure that the head is even all the way around. And go ahead and finger tighten those two tension rods at the same time if possible. What that does is it anchors it at both points across from each other at the same time, and so it keeps you from tightening one side and pulling the drum and the drum head and the rim to the side that you're tightening. So that way it's set up nice and even. You got the same gap on both sides, and now you're going to do the same thing for two more. And this will be the same way that you do when you actually tune the drum. You want to go in a diagonal pattern. So these two are here. The next one you can either go here or you can go here, but you want to go sort of diagonal from the ones that you're using. Basically, the way you tune it is with a star pattern. And so now I've finger tightened those all the way down. I'm going to do the same for the last two. Alright, now that is properly installed. Still loose, but everything is finger tight. And you want to make sure that you finger tighten everything when you first put the head on. That way it's even around the sides. There's no excess tension at one point or the other. That way when you start tuning, you start from basically, I guess, a fresh kind of brand new set, so that when you tune something, if you tune it one turn over here and you tune it one turn over there, it's going to be at about the same spot already. So that's putting the drum head on. Now I'm going to go ahead and put drum heads on all the drums, and then we'll talk about actually tuning the drums. Alright, so you've got the underside of the drum now, and the underside of the drum usually has a little bit of a different head. You can use the same type of head, but usually you'll use something a little more suited to be a resonant head. Now, I bought a lot of drum heads at one time, so I didn't have enough to buy new heads for the bottom of the drums, but it doesn't really matter that much because the stock heads that come with the Pearl drums are made by Remo as well, and they're actually pretty decent heads for the underside of the drum. As long as you tune it correctly, you don't really have to have a really nice resonant head, but you just got to make sure that you do a good job tuning it. And so this head is brand new, hasn't been hit on before or anything like that because it was on the bottom of the drum. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that one on for you. Same thing applies as when you're installing the top of the head. Now, one more thing about changing drum heads. Sometimes you have mount devices that you have to work with. And so on this tom right here, the new Export series has the brand new OptiLock mounting system. And this mounting system basically uses rubber isolators to maximize resonance and sustain. And so it's a really nice mounting system, but when you're putting on a new head, you have to make sure that you put it on right. And so you go ahead and set the rubber gaskets down onto the lugs, and you tighten that down. And then you install the drum head like a normal drum head. The tension rods go through the holes in the top of the rubber isolators. And from there, it's pretty simple. It's just about getting this on there correctly before you go ahead and put the drum head on. Because if you put the drum head on first, and then you're like, oh man, how do I mount this drum? Well, you gotta make sure you put that on before you put the drum head on. So that's just a little extra hint there. Alright, so now you have beautiful new drum heads across all of your drums. Now, during the first step, you made sure that each of your tension rods was as tight as you could get it with your fingers, and we call that finger tight, which is pretty self-explanatory, but it's the easiest way to go ahead and set up your each of your lugs and tension rods to be about the same tension. And so at this point is when you're actually going to start tuning the drum. And what you want to do is you want to use the star pattern, which starts at one lug, and then we'll go across to the lug directly across from it, and then you kind of move a little bit diagonally to the next one. You can either go to the one to the right or to the left of the one that you just tuned. And what this does is it allows you to go ahead and tune in a way that keeps the tension pretty even across the surface of the drum, so that you're not tightening down one side too much or the other side too much. And like I said before, if you do that, it can really take away from the tone that the drum head produces if you crank down one side too fast, and basically you're kind of messing it up a little bit. So you want to make sure you use the star pattern. The easiest way to start off is to go ahead and, since they're all finger tight, do about one turn on each of the lugs. So at this point, you're probably going to have something close to a tone from the drum, but wasn't that close to a tone. And so what I like to use this is actually a Vic Firth timpani mallet, to strike the drum so that you get a tone but not as much attack, because you're listening for the tone. You want to find a tone that sounds good. And so when you hit it and it's still far away from what you want, you can go ahead and increase the tension again. Now you want to always use the star pattern, but you don't want to increase it too much at one time. Don't go ahead and crank it down like 4 spins and then move on to the next one, because then it's going to be either way too high or it's just going to affect the way the drum head sounds because you applied too much tension. So we did one turn the first time. This time we're going to do about half a turn. Alright, so that's about half a tune. Now we're going to see what it sounds like. We're getting a little bit closer. Now, some people tune each of their drums to a specific note. Some drums are kind of created to sound at a specific note, but some drums are just kind of like you tune them to how you want them to sound. And so I don't ever tune to a note. I don't really think, okay, well, I want it to be a B, a C, or whatever you would normally use for tuning to notes. I just tune for a good, I usually aim for a lower sound. Like when you hear my toms, they're more like dooga 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 dooga, instead of like some drummers use a lot of a higher pitch. And now I may actually experiment with this and do something a little bit higher pitched with this new kit. So we'll kind of mess around with it and see what sounds best. But that's the kind of process that you'll use. And you just crank it up just a little bit. Now that you've done half of a turn, go ahead and do like a quarter of a turn. And test it again. So now you're getting a pretty good tone out of the top of the head. It may be somewhere near the note you want. It might be a little bit too high because we haven't tuned the bottom yet, but it's getting closer to an actual tone that we want. And so we'll go ahead and flip the drum over. And we'll adjust the bottom head. Same thing goes, make sure everything's finger tight. Once it's all finger tight, go ahead and give it one good spin. Alright. We'll go ahead and kind of test what it sounds like. Alright. It's a pretty decent sound for right now. So now we're going to go back to the top head and see what we got. And when you're tuning, you want to make sure that you can try and get the same tone coming from each of your lugs, which means they're all the same level of tension or tightness. And so if you go around and you hear one that isn't exactly sounding like the rest, then you want to adjust accordingly, either go up or go down. And all these are just general tuning tips. So it's not like I'm really introducing anyone to something that is groundbreaking or anything, but these are all just kind of things that you need to do when you're tuning to try and get the best possible sound. so those are the basic steps to tuning the actual drum. Now I'm going to go ahead and try and get the whole kit set up to pretty much a sound that I'm looking for, and then we'll kind of talk about what I did to get that sound, because the actual process of me tuning each one of these drums is going to take a little while, so it's not something I can just sit down and show you in one video. So basically I'll go ahead and get them tuned, and then I'll talk about the overall sound and how I got there. Alright, so now that you've got your new heads on your drums, you've got everything set up, you're ready to go, let's talk a little bit about tuning. Now, we talked about before, you want to make sure you put the heads on correctly, you want to make sure everything is centered. When you tighten it down, you want to make sure that you use even tension around, finger tighten them. So you've done all that. You've put the heads on correctly. All of that is perfect. So now you have to worry about actually tuning them. You want to make sure that you get the sound you're looking for and exactly what kind of sound setup you want for your kit. Now, like I said before, if you have a good sounding kit mixed with good sounding drum heads, it's not going to be that hard to tune the drums. Now this Pearl Export kit sounds awesome, and these Remo coated Emperors sound awesome as well. So for me, it's not that much trouble to get an awesome sound out of this kit. If the drums sound awesome, heads sound awesome, you're already halfway there. All you have to do is tune it to sound awesome in the way you want it to sound awesome. And I use the word awesome a lot, but that's the point. So basically, what you first have to decide is exactly what kind of sounds you want from your drums. Do you want higher toms? Do you want like be doo 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 doo, or do you want lower toms like doo 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 doo? Like keep the whole kind of structure of the drums, the sound, to a lower kind of tone or a higher tone. And once you've established that, that's when you want to start tuning. Now, it's really, I mean, for me, it's more so trial and error than it is some secret recipe, like you turn it just a certain number of times around and the drum's going to sound good. I mean, every drum sounds a little different, and there's plenty of people that have their own ways of doing it. Some knock on the shell to find the pitch of the shell. Some actually tune it to a specific note, and I don't do either one of these. I hear kind of the pitches I want in my head, and then I almost tune by feel. I tune until I feel that the drum is kind of at its peak moment of like tension. And so that's not something that I can really teach you guys. It's kind of, like I said, trial and error. You're going to do it until you figure out what works for you. But I kind of want to share some of the tips and tricks that I use for getting a good sound out of any drum that I play on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tap lightly on all these drums. The Zoom mic I'm using to record is set for my voice, so if I play them loudly, it's just going to distort. But I'll kind of show you the tones that I have set up. And so it's just, the actual 10-inch is a little bit higher than I would normally record, but now that I have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set up on the toms, and the floor toms are a little bit bigger, I was interested in going for a little bit of a higher tone. And so let's do that again. Alright, so that is kind of the progression of the drums. Now, what I did was I found the top drum first. So it's a nice, not too high, it's not like really, really tight, but it's a pretty high tone for that actual drum. And then you want to know where you want to go from there. So I want to go down, and I want to start descending pretty quickly because I don't want to stay up high too often. So I don't want it to go like dee 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 doo 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 doo. I want it to go dee dee doo 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 doo. And by this point, I know that sounds funny the way I kind of sing it, but by this point I want it to be really low, really heavy hitting. And so I want just this first tom to be high. And so you go down a little bit, you kind of hear it in your head like ba 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 ba. And so you kind of hear what you want to go for. And really the trick to getting the actual tone out of the drum is just getting your top head to kind of the right tension that you want. Like what you want the top head when you tap on it to sound kind of like the tone you want. And then you just need to mess with the bottom head, either tightening it or loosening it until it doesn't, like it produces the sound you want in comparison with the top head. So if you hit the top head and it goes, then you know that you're too low. But if you tune it up and it goes bit wee, and and kind of like gives it a higher pitch, then you may be too high. And so what you want to do is you want to get it where it just kind of goes through the drum and they work together to produce a nice tone. Now, one thing I haven't really said yet is one thing that I really value on my drums is I like the attack and I don't like too much resonance, especially in my recordings. I don't need a lot of resonance. I'm not looking for a huge sound that's just like booming for days. These drums really produce that sound, which is really impressive from them, being as affordable as they are, but that's not really the sound I'm going for completely. And so this right here is my biggest, not really secret because you can see them in all the videos, but this is a Remo O-ring. It's basically a ring that goes on the drum, and it kind of takes away some of the resonance, and it takes away some of your work tuning the drum. Because when this head doesn't ring as much, you don't have to worry as much about overtones, you don't have to worry as much about the extra sounds. See, now you hear the two heads a little bit more. I put it on, you don't hear all that extra ringing. And so that is, number one, the most important step to easily creating a good sound for your drums. Now, some people aren't going to like that. Some people are going to say, man, I don't want to choke my drums. Well, you don't have to. I'm just showing you, like, people like the way that my drums sound in my videos, and so this is how I do it. So I have those Remo O-rings on all the drums, and it gives you that sound. And so you get an awesome attack, you get the nice pitches between the drums, and it sounds great. So that is the biggest trick to kind of creating the same type of sound that I use in my videos. Now, like I said, you want to just figure out those pitches, and you just kind of trial and error until you get the right thing. Now, a little bit of like kind of advice for when you're doing the trial and error thing, never tighten it too much. Say you think that the drum head is a little bit low, barely change it. Just put your drum key and just barely put just a little bit of a turn on every single tension rod, because you want to keep the drum head even. You want to keep the tension even across the whole head, and you don't want to do it too much at one time. Little tiny changes are going to make your job a lot easier trying to find a sound that you like, because if you're kind of adjusting it too much, then you may miss the sound you want, and then you may get confused. Like, you may raise it up a lot, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, that didn't really do what I wanted it to do. Maybe I should have gone lower. And then you do it lower, but you do it too low, and then you're like, well, that doesn't sound right either, so I want it higher, and then you go too high. So you want to make sure every single turn you do is just a very small amount when you get close to the sound you're looking for. So that's tuning toms. I'm going to talk a little bit about the low toms here. And so you hear this drum down here, it just has some incredible low end. You may not hear it as much from that mic up there. You may. I'm not sure what it sounds like yet, but that drum just has some punch. And so I've tuned it so that the top head gets a good attack, and then the bottom head just gives it that low end. I mean, it's just so much power behind that drum. And that's because of the Asian mahogany that's inside of these new export shells. They really give it that extra EQ, that extra low end to it, and gives it a lot of punch as well. So let's talk about the bass drum. Now, the kick drum is something that there's so many different sounds you can go for. You can go for a really open, very resonant sound, like boom, boom, boom. Or you can go for a sound kind of like what I do, and I just want the attack. I just like the punch. That's all I need. You hear what I'm playing. I'm actually trying to incorporate a little more low end into it. I've got a special microphone that's basically, it's a custom-made sub-kick mic that picks up the low end frequencies, and I'm trying to use that to create an even cooler sound for the kick, but I'm still very focused on the attack. And so you don't hear too much ringing. You hear mostly just attack. And the way you get that is you want to make sure that your batter head is pretty tight. Like, I'm not saying like just crank it up or anything, but when you hit it, you want to make sure that you feel like you're hitting something. You don't want it to be too loose, because then it's going to get a real wobbly, real crackly kind of sound. And so you want to hit it and get that attack. But the way you take away a lot of the resonance, the way you go for just the sound that I'm going for, is you want to make sure your front kick head has a hole in it. That's always a great way to do it. Now they have these things called, what is it? A kick port, I believe is what they're called. I've never used one. Some people say they make the drum sound a little bit lower. They give it a good tone. Some people don't like them. That's something that you could always try out. I mean, even if it doesn't do anything excessively awesome, it still gives you that hole that you're looking for. But the standard way is to just buy a front bass drum head, a resonant head with a hole cut in it. Now the pearl head that came with this drum already has the hole cut in it, so that was really helpful and really easy to work with there. So that hole allows some of the air out, and it keeps it from ringing too much, because when the air hits that batter head, or not the batter, it hits the resonant head, instead of just flopping it around and giving it a lot of resonance, it exits through that hole. So that helps a little bit. But the main thing you want to do is you want to get a blanket or a comforter of some sort and put it up inside of the bass drum down on the bottom. It's the cheapest way to do it. They sell EQ pads, they sell like bags and stuff by different companies that you can set down in there, and they're supposed to do the same thing as putting a comforter in there. So what I do is this time I used a black sheet because it matches the kit. Last time I used a piece of an old comforter that I had, just shoved it right in there. And it takes away some of that extra resonance, and it gives you more of that attack. And when you get that attack and when you take away a lot of the resonance, it's more of a focused sound. It's more of focused on the frequencies that you want. And so from that point on, if you get that batter head nice and punchy, and you make sure that the resonant head isn't too loose as well, and you get the hole cut in it, and the actual you get the blanket inside, then you're going to have a pretty decent kick head already. From that point, it's just kind of messing with the front and the batter and the resonant heads to get the exact kind of sound you're looking for. Sort of like tuning the toms here, but it's just trial and error, and it's getting exactly what you want. It also depends on the kick pedal you're using. If you're using a hard beater, it'll produce more attack. If you're using a soft beater, it'll produce more tone. So you have to take that in consideration as well. Also, the way you play. If you hit really hard, well, I wasn't hitting really hard because I don't want to mess up the mic, but if you hit really hard, then it's maybe more attack than it is tone, but if you just barely tap it, you may get more of that low end. And so it really depends on how you play, what kind of sound you're going to get. So those are the toms and the kick drum. Lastly, our snare drums. Now, some people really like the sound that I get from my snare drums. Some people don't like the sound that I get from my snare drums. It's really personal preference what kind of sound you're going for, but I am really happy with the way that this drum sounds. I'm actually really excited at the way this drum sounds because it's the 14-inch by 5.5-inch that comes with the new export kit, and I'm used to playing on a thinner drum. I play the 13-inch by 3-inch Pearl Piccolo, and I like that one. I love that one. I played it for a long time. This drum is a lot deeper, so it kind of gives you a different sound to play with. Now, like I said, I'm not going to hit this too hard, but I want to give you an idea of what it sounds like through that Zoom mic. You hear a lot of snare, you hear a lot of response from the snares, which is what you get from a deeper snare, and then you also get a nice pop. Now, what I've done when I tune up my snare drums, once again, Remo O-ring, this is what it sounds like without it. Hear a lot of ringing coming off of the drum, kind of ringing that I just don't want in my recording. But with the O-ring, all you get is that attack, all you get is that snare. It sounds incredible. I love it. And so once you do that, you get that O-ring on there. That's going to help out. But what you want to do is you want to go ahead and make sure that the bottom head is nice and tight so you get a lot of response from the snares. And I actually tighten up the snares themselves a lot too. In fact, got the snares almost as tight as they'll go on this thing. That way when I hit the drum, it doesn't like ring too much, but it gives it some good attack right off the bat. And then that top head is tuned nice and tight as well. Good amount of tension around the whole drum itself. And what you do is when you get a good tight top head, a good tight bottom head, and a lot of snare tension, you're going to get a punchy, really attack-oriented sound. And like I said, that's what I go for on my drums, is I want something with a crack. I don't need too much response, But the cool thing is with this deeper drum, this snare drum really sounds awesome. I was so impressed when I got to try it out the first time, is that it gives you that response as well. I really like the crack, but I also enjoy to be able to play ghost notes and stuff to have the actual response. So you hear it. So you can kind of play the little ghost notes. I may not be able to show you correctly on the Zoom mic without playing a little bit louder how the difference sounds, but it really gives a lot of response on the softer side as well, which is cool. And then over here I just have the same kind of principle, very tuned up piccolo snare, or not piccolo, this is a firecracker snare, tuned up nice and high, and just gives a quick crack. A little bit higher pitch than this one over here. So you get that's kind of your sound. So there you have it. That's how I tune my drums. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to take the Zoom mic, I'm going to turn down the sensitivity a little bit. I'll show you how they sound in person being played, and then I'll show you how they sound through recordings being played as well. It sounds really awesome in both ways, so I'm excited to share that with you guys. I hope you've enjoyed this tuning tutorial. If you have any more questions that I can answer, definitely shoot them down below in the comments section. I would love to help you out with as much as I can. Hopefully this answers pretty much all the questions though. It tells you how to put the head on, how to do that correctly, and then talks about the ways that I tune the drums and stuff. So hopefully I answered most questions with it. And yeah, that's how I get my awesome sound. If you're interested in the kit I'm playing here, it's the Pearl Export Series, brand new from Pearl. Sounds awesome, looks awesome, and I'm very impressed with the way it's sounding so far. So there you have it. Go home, tune some drums, and Remo drum heads, and I can't get it off the drum. Remo O-rings are your best friend. I promise you that unless you just like a sound that lasts for days, those O-rings are going to really give you something that you're looking for. So thank you so much for watching. Let's play a little drums, show you how it sounds, and subscribe.